Hello and welcome to this session on using conference calling in organising campaigns as part of Organise 2020. I'm John Wood, I'm the Digital Manager at the TUC and I work with our affiliates on our Digital Lab project. And I'm really excited to be hosting this session. We've got two great guests who've got a lot of insight on the topic to share with us. Emma Rees is a great person to have with us to talk about digital organising. She's one of the original founders of the grassroots organisation Momentum, and she spent years developing new ways of using digital to build leadership and to run campaigns. And more recently, she's been working with digital consultancy, Social Practice, who work with organisations in the US and internationally, taking kind of cutting edge distributed organising techniques out into the progressive movement. And we've also got Mike Joslin, Lead Marketing Officer at NEU with us. NEU are one of the first unions to make use of this tactic in a large way, and it's grown into a programme of activity that's really taken off since the lockdown. And Mike's team have been instrumental in inspiring hundreds of members to take the first steps to becoming reps and have supported reps to protect their members in new ways during the crisis. And Mike himself has got a long background in big engagement campaigns for a variety of unions in his own former life running a digital campaign consultancy. So thanks and welcome to all of you. I'm going to hand over to Emma now to help set the scene on why we think this new organising tactic is going to be so important for our unions. Over to you, Emma.
That's great. Thank you, John. And yeah, it's great to be here with all of you. Thanks so much for coming along. I know that during coronavirus, it feels like we spend even more time on screens, but it's great to have so many of you here. And we're going to talk about spending more time on screens. So it's very much of the moment. Just as to sort of build on what John said, I was one of the co-founders of Momentum and worked there as its national organiser for the first couple of years through the 2017 general election, and then since the end of 2017, I've been working with different unions and progressive organisations, trying to find ways to engage volunteers and people within campaigns at a large scale, and to try to reduce as many of the barriers to participation as possible. And this tactic of the conference call or the organising call has proved really, really effective in a whole host of different kind of situations. I know Mike's going to tell us, a brilliant example of an extremely large, probably the largest scale call that I've ever heard of, which has been so inspiring, and I'm really looking forward to his contribution. But I've also seen this tactic work in other settings, and calls that have 50 people or 100 people or 500 people on have been incredibly powerful and effective mobilisation and organising moments as well. So just to say, obviously since the outbreak of coronavirus in particular, a lot more of our communications have gone online, and online calls have really proliferated for campaigners and organisers across the board. And just like in-person meetings, the purpose of these online calls can be very varied. So in some instances, they might be discussions, they might be planning sessions, trainings, kind of online rallies. But I suppose what I want to focus on specifically here is conference calls or online calls that support the organising objectives of your union or of an organisation or a campaign. So it's really like how we can use this platform of online video calls to support the organising work that the union is doing. So one of my colleagues that I work with very closely is Becky Bond, who some of you may have read a book that she co-authored a few years back called Rules for Revolutionaries: How Big Organising Changes Everything. And she was a senior advisor to the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign. And during that campaign, they came up with a particular method called a barnstorm, right, for an in-person meeting to try to get, they found it as an effective way to get volunteers or to get people who were interested in the campaign signed up to take on concrete work of the campaign and to sign up as volunteers. And essentially what we found over time and through a number of projects that we worked on is that Zoom and other platforms can provide an online version of that kind of in-person barnstorming meeting, where people might be interested to find out more about the topic or about the issue, about the campaign, but they leave not just having heard someone else speak and then, you know, switch the telly back on. They leave having committed themselves to take a concrete action and to step up and to be part of the campaign. And I suppose that's the key defining point of the organising call, as opposed to other online calls, is that everybody, or as many people as possible who attend that call, leave having signed up to take a very concrete action. So earlier this year, I worked with the TUC, who've been experimenting with this tactic. And for the start of Heart Unions Week this year, the TUC launched, they kickstarted a campaign to introduce better preventative sexual harassment policies in workplaces. And they used a conference call tactic in order to get this going. And what was really great about that example is that this was something that, you know, they advertised publicly. They obviously advertised to their various email lists, but also through social media and other organisations as well. And it attracted a whole lot of people to join the call who weren't necessarily members of a trade union. And the topic itself about sexual harassment in the workplace, you know, that spoke to a wider layer of people who might not necessarily, as I said, be union members or engaged in union activity, but they came because they care about preventing sexual harassment. And on the call, Frances O'Grady and Joe Grady from UCU were there to speak and share insights. But that part, which was very valuable and very important, was then followed quickly by an organiser from the TUC, really setting out what the TUC's plan was for supporting people to take action in their workplaces to improve, to get better sexual harassment preventative policies in place. And that was followed directly by a call to action. And I think the combination of having had the sort of inspiring speakers followed clearly by a concrete plan to win, how we could make action, and then asking people to get on board with it, saw an incredibly high conversion rate where I believe it was 93% of the people who were on the call signed up to take action, which is exceptionally high. And if you compare that to an email that you might send out to a list or a post that you might put on social media, you know, it really is unrivaled. So it's definitely something that can be incredibly powerful, not just for speaking to different people and to newer layers of people, but also for setting out a plan to win and getting people's committed action then and there. I'm going to pause for now and hand over to Mike, and yeah, then we'll go through a few more of the kind of nuts and bolts in the next section. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks Emma. So I'm Mike Josselin, the Lead Marketing Officer at the National Education Union. First of all, I'd like to thank John for inviting me to be on this panel and to share our experience of the last few months around organising digital calls. The first thing to say is that what we've managed to achieve, which I think is quite good, and I welcome colleagues' feedback and in the chat, but we wouldn't be able to achieve any of that without the support of people within the NEU to embrace and invest in technology, including the head of comms, Helen Watson, David Wilson, Assistant General Secretary, and our General Secretaries, Kevin Courtney and Mary Bilstead, who have supported and actively encouraged the adoption of new technologies and using that to speak to our members. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of sort of what we've done over the last 12 months. I started at the NEU in April 2019, and there was a background of lower email open rates and a lack of membership participation digitally, and we wanted to grow our communities. And we had specific challenges. When I started the NEU, I came into a ballot around assessment. So we were balloting all of our primary school members about whether they wanted to take strike action to do with the assessment regime. We also had an ongoing dispute among our sixth form college lecturers about the pay that they have and their working conditions. And we wanted to find ways of engaging with those groups and driving forward actions. So we started trialing a software called Telephone Town Hall, which just a brief background about how it works. You have a sign-up form, you put in your name and your phone number, and then the system calls you at the prescribed time. You can also dial in using a telephone number. It's then basically like a radio phone in. We can decide who's on the line, we can screen questions, and we can put them through to the callers. We started doing that with our general secretaries and our president for the SATs ballot and the sixth form dispute. We had 100 on our first one, which at the time we thought was amazing. We've used them to engage with the specific audiences. So for the sixth form strike, we followed up those who attended and agreed to take action by email and text, and we encouraged them to attend our rallies and to take digital actions and all of that kind of stuff. And we got very positive results from that. During the general election, the School Cuts campaign continued to use digital calls to identify and mobilise activists. We also used the Telephone Town Hall software to engage groups of PPCs. We're not affiliated to any political party at the NEU, so we did a number of calls with different political parties to engage them in our campaigns, and we used the Telephone Town Hall software to do that, which was very effective. It was on the back burner for a while, and then we had coronavirus, and we had a new challenge of how do we engage with our membership. Our digital call program has, over the last 3 months, reached nearly 100,000 people of our members on our calls, which is about 25% of our membership, slightly less, which I think is a very significant amount. Suddenly, when coronavirus hit, our calls started surging. We did a telephone town hall, and we got 5,000 people on it, and it grew from there. We were using telephone town hall rather than video software at the time because we thought it was more accessible. So because it was on the phone, more people were likely to pick up because it rang you. And you could also ring in, so you don't have to sit behind a computer and all of that kind of stuff. And we were getting high connection rates and all of that kind of stuff. We started using it to engage with specific sectors: supply teachers, support staff, independent sector, sixth forms, those in leadership positions, to drive action and ask them to take specific action and to share guidance for those sectors that we have produced, and to answer people's questions, and so on. Unfortunately, a few weeks into coronavirus, telephone town hall failed. The mobile phone network, it was at its highest usage ever, and people kept on dropping off the calls. It just kept on crashing, and it wasn't sustainable. So we moved over to Zoom webinar. I feel that there's been a step change over coronavirus in terms of people using video calls and their familiarity with it. Zoom usage has gone up so much, as everyone I'm sure will be aware of, but people have become more used to it, and we're getting very high engagement on our calls, as I'll come into. And I feel that Zoom is now the best way of achieving the things that we wanted to do. So we stopped using telephone town hall for that reason. We started with a 1K Zoom limit, and we were organising a call around what next for schools. We have a lot of scared members, people who want advice, people who need help and want us to know what to do next. So we organised a call to let our members know what we were going to do next. We started with a 1K limit. So many people registered, I then moved it up to 3K. More people continued registering. Then we moved up to 5K, and then I had to move to 20K because so many people had registered. And we ended up having a call with 20,000 people, which was quite a thing to manage. I believe it's the biggest call that a union has held, and it was a significant thing for the union. And managed to gain a lot of momentum, manages to relay a lot of information to our members and drive further action, get people to take further action that I will come on to further in my presentation. Key to success, I believe, is having strong speakers, a relevancy to the audience. So we not just do, it's not about all member calls all the time. Like we do really specific calls. Like last night, for example, we did a Zoom call for Senkos in mainstream. So special needs support staff within mainstream schools to support those people, and we get high turnouts to these calls because they're relevant to the audience. I think there should be an accessible time. You need a few days to build it via Facebook advertising, email, text message, social promotion, and word of mouth amongst members, which is very important. We've also had a number of accessibility challenges. With the adoption of video software, we have to make sure it's accessible. So we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we've done without the support of the Unite's British Sign Language branch, Nubsley, and particularly Sam Riddle and Nikki Evans, who have given us massive support. And we have decided at the NEU that we will have them on every call. We've also used a software called Verbit, which provides, because Zoom doesn't provide transcripts, so we use Verbit to have live transcripts on all, subtitles and transcripts on all calls. And we also use a software called Otter to do similar for our regions and our branches. We've had some media challenges. The Daily Mail go through all of our calls that we put on YouTube and log into some of them. So if there are any Daily Mail journalists on this call, hello. But Mary and Kevin said some things that ended up on the front page of the Daily Mail, so we've had to deal with that. But we also been using Zoom to organise communities and to specifically drive action. So I'm sort of getting to the nub of this call. So one of the things that we've done is we have done a lot of calls with reps. So we launched a checklist for returning to school on the 1st of June. We're about to launch one for September. Basically a health and safety checklist. We created an app created by Josh Carrington of ChangeLab, which is an extremely effective app. Every rep had a link. They were sent the link unique to them. So what I'm just going to do now is I'm just going to share my screen. Apologies for 1 second. So what you should be seeing now is our app. So everyone was sent this, and we all organised specific Zoom calls to promote the usage of these apps, which have had massively high take-up of our reps. Without giving specific figures, we have had significant usage. Every rep gets one of these. So you're seeing one here for Woodford County High School. If you can have the completed checklist here on the right, it says download. If you click start, it basically takes you through a long checklist, which I won't do, but you can see all these different things here. Also, it's got a button for not your school, so you can change it and all that kind of stuff. Once you get to the end, you press generate PDF. It allows you to send the PDF to your head teacher, and it also sends it to your branch automatically, and we get the data nationally. I believe this is one of the reasons why schools didn't fully reopen on June 1st, along with the NEU position, because a lot of schools were saying locally it wasn't safe, so it forced the DfE into that position. We encourage the usage of this app via Zoom calls, and that is a tactic that we've used very successfully over the last months to drive action. And for people on the call, I would heavily recommend, if you're doing a product launch or you're asking people to drive an action, organising a Zoom call is a really good way of doing that. And we have done that to great success. We have, in terms of organising communities, we put guidance for supply teachers, we've relayed information, we have done rep recruitment, we've recruited thousands of reps through these calls. We've also recruited checklist monitors, which for schools that don't have a rep, we've asked people to take the step of filling in the checklist that I just showed you, is driven lots of people, thousands of people, to become checklist monitors that we're going to turn into reps, but they've come directly from our Zoom calls and from engagement activity where we have asked people to do that. So we've got thousands of new reps, thousands of checkers, monitors. In terms of how we manage the calls, we have a Teams chat for our speakers. We have a Teams chat for our tech team. We have a tech team of about 6 members of staff on each call that monitor the questions, and we have someone who's in charge of collating them for the chair, who then reads out the questions in the Q&A part. And I create the calls, bring people in, make sure our software is on there and all that kind of stuff. So just a few more things before I finish. We recently held a Zoom with Jesse Jackson that had 7,000 people on it. In terms of how we collect data for these calls, we collect we collect a lot of data, not just who's on the call, but actions that they might want to take, or more information about them. So on the Jesse Jackson call, we asked people if they wanted to be a rep and if they were NEU members. We had 7,000 people on the call. It was an amazing thing to be a part of. But is what we did afterwards was, I think, also good. So we had about 800 people who said they wanted to be reps. We got our membership data and we made sure these people were actually members, and we verified that. We then looked at where there was a rep already, so we weren't duplicating. And then we've used the Call Hub phoning software to get staff members to ring all those people, basically appointing them as reps where there isn't one. And I think that is a very good thing. And has allowed us to increase our rep recruitment, and we're doing. This is just a small subset of the organising we've done, but we've been using the data from Zooms to do that kind of organising and data follow up. In terms of increased engagement, we've seen increased open rates. Our polling and focus groups that we've done show that people are overwhelmingly happy with them and want it to continue. They find it very engaging. They're very happy. They think it's a very good thing the union has done. So we'll continue to do that. Moving forward, we're going to continue engaging particular sectors, and we're going to move towards tackling big subjects with big calls. So apologise if I've gone on a little bit, but hopefully that was useful. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. That was exceptionally useful. Thank you so much, Mike. And also, yeah, I'm sure I speak for everyone about just incredibly inspired and thankful for all of the work that you and the NEU have been doing in this really difficult period. So yeah, as I said, that was really helpful. I'm going to take us to talk us through the steps that you might take if you wanted to try out organising a conference call in your setting, and obviously it would be great if 20,000 people came to every call, but I think it's clear to say that you can still organise something that's really effective and that supports the organising efforts that you're undertaking, on a smaller scale. So if you bear with me just a moment, I'm also going to share. Bear with me. Okay, great. So I thought it would be helpful to just talk through, to begin with, the sort of typical structure that you might use for your organising call. So a couple of key things to sort of point out. Firstly, it's really worth always having an organiser. In my experience, having someone who's an organiser, right, who understands what the organising objective is that you're trying to get through, to host the call. A couple of mistakes have been made in calls I've been involved in the past. So we've had really charismatic and brilliant sort of speakers host calls, but who are not the people who are actually going to be, hitting the phones and sending the text messages the following day. And I think it's important to have an organiser, who obviously has the presentation skills and the communication skills and all of that, but to have an organiser who hosts the call, because the host is really the person who holds the purpose and drives the call and kind of holds the agenda. And as I said, unlike online discussions or online rallies, the purpose of these calls is really to, increase engagement and to support the organising work that you're doing. So that's definitely something that we found really helpful. So yeah, the host might sort of, welcome and open the call, outline the agenda, set the tone. You then might have your first speaker, and this person typically will give some background on the topic that's being discussed and outline the sort of top line strategy or the plan to win. And again, this is something that we found really important in terms of encouraging people to step up to volunteer and to get involved, is really understanding what the goal of the campaign is and what the plan is in order to achieve it. And again, a key thing here is like, you don't necessarily have to sugarcoat it, or, we're not there as salespeople. Like a lot of this is hard and difficult and complex. But if the thinking has been done and there's a clear sort of theory of change about what it is that we're trying to achieve and how we think we're going to do it, and that being communicated in a sort of honest way, we found that to be really helpful in terms of motivating people to get involved. I think, people need to feel like it's a good use of their time to step up for that higher level of engagement and activity. We've often also found it useful to then have an additional speaker who might be someone who's directly affected by the issue or the campaign, or who has some personal experience that's very closely linked to the topic that you're organising on. So for a TUC call around the McStrikes at the end of last year, we had some of the striking workers who could come on and speak to their experiences and what McDonald's were like as an employer and why they were going out on strike. At this point, so you've had the scene's been set, the plan's been outlined, there's been somebody who's given that personal input. At that point, the host would then, make the big ask, right? And at this point in the call, the link to a volunteer sign-up form would be posted in the chat box, and people would be encouraged, with a lot of encouragement and a lot of repetition, to sign up to be involved in this particular initiative. And something that Mike mentioned as well, that it's really worth thinking through in advance, what is the information that you need that's going to support your organising. So what is it that you actually need to know, and make sure that that information is being captured then in a basic form. It can be a Google form, it can be a CRM form, depending on what your setup is in the context that you're organising. Yes, that's where you'll collect, their personal information, but then also an indication of what activity it is that they are prepared to step up and take. We've also found it really useful to have a third speaker and the purpose of this contribution would be like a sort of peer-to-peer sharing. So this might be a grassroots activist, or it might be a member of the union. It might be somebody who has already taken the action that you're asking the other people on the call to do, and who can speak from their experience of having, got involved. Maybe it's a rep, maybe it's somebody who's just recently become active within the union, and they can sort of share their personal experience, maybe alleviate any concerns that people have. And as I said, it would then go back to the host, who makes the organising call, makes the organising ask again, and wraps up the call. Just a few kind of, this is the fun bit, a few of the nuts and bolts. If you wanted to start making this happen, this would be a few of the things that you need to think about. So obviously choosing a platform. I totally concur with everything that Mike has said. In the past, I've used a number of different platforms for this, including a telephone software called Maestro. However, I think now with everything that's happened in the lockdown, overwhelmingly, much larger numbers of people are used to using Zoom. So that does seem to be the best platform to use, but of course there are others out there as well. I don't work for Zoom, so I'm not trying to sell you that specifically. And then you need to think through before the call what your data capture is going to be. Now, ideally, you want to capture the data of the people who are signing up for the call, and you can do that through Zoom using the Zoom sign-up form, or you can create your own form to do that. So you want a list of the people who've RSVP'd, so you can follow up with them after the call, and then another data capture point of the people who are going to sign up to take action. And that would be the link that gets posted into the chat box over and over again when the host is asking for people to sign up on the call itself. So by the end of the call, you've got those two data sets, the people who've RSVP'd and the people who are signing up to volunteer. Scheduling the call, again, we found that one of the really good bits of feedback we've had from organising these calls is often people, a lot of women, but people with caring responsibilities, really feel like the benefit of having these calls that they can do from home when they put the kids in bed, or they've just made tea, or whatever else. So evening, unlike being able to having to go to a physical meeting, there's generally, these can become a lot more accessible for people. So we generally schedule calls that start after 7 o'clock, because the feedback that we had is a sort of 7:30 start is helpful for people who've got children, younger children, to put to bed. With recruitment, I think, I'm not sure, Mike, I think you mentioned that you have a good few days to run in, but days maybe rather than weeks, and that also speaks to the same experience that that I've had as well. I think there's something about the urgency that these calls can generate. So we generally, in projects I've been involved in, sort of about a maximum of a week really before the call is when we would publicly start to launch it, because I think that sense of urgency can really help people to commit to coming and to joining the call. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the script. So it's really, I'll go back to this one. It's really worth actually scripting out the call itself, particularly the hosts section, because the host has a really important, and you could have two co-hosts potentially, but the host has a really important role particularly for hitting that organising objective, because that's the person who's going to be making the ask. So really scripting it out carefully is something that we found helpful, and certainly having a run through beforehand as well. And then, the other thing from an organising perspective, I know it's an obvious point, but this tactic is best used at the point where you are ready for the floodgates to open and for lots more people to get involved, right? This isn't where you're working out the strategy. This isn't where you're encouraging people to come in and have a discussion. That might be a different sort of online call, but the organising call is really at the point where you're ready for people to sign up and to get straight to work. And so it's worth having thought in advance of the call exactly what that follow-up is going to look like, and exactly what the journey is going to look like for the people who join the call and then agree to sign up. So are they going to, have you drafted the follow-up emails that they're going to receive, which give them the resources that they need? Have you, produced any guides or templates that they might need to take the action that you're asking them to take? Is there, do you have a plan for how you're going to continue the communication with them after? I know that, for instance, the Bakers Union have been organising through WhatsApp, for example. So I've been adding people into a WhatsApp group and using that as a way to then have ongoing communications. So both the volunteer follow-up and also thinking through what the infrastructure is going to be to support you to continue with the organising beyond the call is really important as well. And I just thought I'd share this example here. So this was from the TUC call around sexual harassment, preventative sexual harassment measures. And I just thought it was nice to see this. This is a good example of some follow-up that took place shortly after. Johnny was contacted by peer-to-peer texting from an organiser at the TUC, and as you can see, they were able to have this one-to-one interaction around how the action was going, and Amy was able to then offer support and guidance for the challenges that Johnny was experiencing. And lastly, just some nice feedback that, I think, just as Mike was saying, across the board, people really seem to like this tactic. It's something they can do from home. It's something that they can do that helps them to feel part of something much bigger. Particularly these calls that the NEU have been doing that have had thousands of people on at a time where we've been in social isolation. It makes people feel part of that sense of the movement. and that can be incredibly powerful and inspiring and reassuring for people as well. And I particularly like these 2 bits of feedback that came on social media, where people both said that the fact that they were able to join from home, put the kids to bed, and then take part in this call with trade union activists, that was something that she really appreciated. So I will pause there, and very happy to answer any questions or continue the conversation. Thanks very much.
Unmute myself. Thank you very much for that there. Emma, that's fantastic. Really useful. Anybody's got particular questions they would like to flag up, please do stick them in the Q&A, and we've got a few minutes that we can get to several of them. There's a couple of things so echoed in comments, questions that people have had that they kind of say have been partially answered there. There's I think an issue around choosing platforms, and you've both highlighted Zoom as a choice, and Mike, you've worked your way through a couple of them. But are there any principles you would suggest to people at different levels in unions if they were looking to do some of this stuff in the tools that they might choose to start experimenting with?
I'm happy to come in on that.
Oh, thanks.
Is that okay, John?
Yeah.
First thing to say is I've had a couple of messages from a few people who are listening to this call, sort of asking for some of the specifics of my presentation. I'm happy to do that in private, not in public, because I understand this call is going to go onto YouTube. So if you do want the information, please email me at mike.jocelyn@neu.org.uk, and I will be able to happily have a conversation with you. In terms of the answer to your question, I think it kind of depends on your budget and what you're trying to achieve. Zoom at the level that the NEU has it is quite expensive. It is the 20,000 webinar limit for a year is about £50,000. So it is a lot of money, but we think it's a worthwhile investment. If you are going to use it for a year, you're going to use it heavily, then it's definitely worthwhile investing in that. But you might not want the 20,000. If you're a smaller union, you might want 1,000, or you're a region, you might want lower than that. So they are affordable and spread over a year with strong usage. It's a worthwhile investment. Telephone town hall, their pricing depends on sort of the amount of people you have on the call. It might, if you're just doing a one-off call and you're a union that has a lot of people who work on site and are out and about and not able to access a video, then telephone town hall might be the more software for you. And there's all sorts of other softwares out there. I would say the principle should be, are you doing it as a one-off or a long term? What suits your needs? Do you have particular issues with accessibility? So do you need to have a BSL signers on the call? And all the, I think they're the sort of like key considerations to make. No one case is the same. So like Zoom might not work for other unions, but it works for us. But I would take it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, thanks. If Emma doesn't have anything to add to that, two things I'd kind of add to that might be maybe consider, what do your members use? If you know that they are likely to be familiar with something like Microsoft Teams through work, then maybe go with what they know. I've also come across in some places where there are groups of workers who have particular privacy concerns. And Zoom has had a lot of bad press around privacy of late. So providing ways that people can still access this, like the dial-in option on Zoom, is really useful. Also consider if there's talk to your union centrally in the IT and information teams, your data protection officer, they won't thank me for referring you onto them probably, because they're so overworked in general in most unions. But where you your branch suddenly acquiring new sources of personal data, with them, it's good to get that lined up across the union. I'd say. Thank you for that. There's also an issue of kind of scale here. So, Mike, you've come in at a very large end of this. You guys obviously made the case for budget on something like this. Emma, so if you were starting from scratch with a union here, where do they take their first steps? Are there kind of tips on how they go about it if they don't have the kind of the full team and program that any you have here?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I think it comes back to the fact that this is a tactic. So it's there to support the organising that the union is undertaking, and it should feed into the strategy, you know, whatever the strategy is that you're pursuing, whether that's an industrial strategy or, you know, or a kind of wider political or campaigning or engagement strategy, thinking through what, you know, because I think Zoom and video calls in general can really support both the kind of community and engagement building part of the union's work, as well as the industrial work potentially as well, in terms of bringing people together. So I'd really be guided by that in the first instance. I think that there's a lot of scope for, and this might touch on one of the questions that's just been raised around the kind of ladder of engagement. I think there's scope for this to be a really good entry point into union activity. So definitely, you know, a lot of the projects I've been involved in, people have joined Zoom calls with either no or very limited prior experience of union work, but who were particularly, you know, the issue that was being addressed on the call spoke to them as a person rather than as a union member. So I think there's definitely scope there. And in the case of the sexual harassment campaign I mentioned before, that was a way of identifying a lot of new potential, you know, people who could potentially go on to become reps in the future, you know, in areas where there might not be, workplaces where there might not be reps already. So yeah, first principles I think is, you know, what are your organising objectives, and start from there, and using, you know, thinking through carefully who you're targeting. You know, if this is about increasing engagement and activity, then you know, advertising it more broadly, doing that kind of relationship work in advance to get people to get as many people as possible onto the call, but also supplementing that with the, you know, Facebook advertising, and, you know, emailing people, texting people, and, you know, using a kind of full spectrum of recruitment options can be really, really valuable.
Thank you very much, Emma, and that speaks to kind of question Paul's put in about the detail on the ladder of engagement rungs before and after the conference call. Just to give another example there, Emma discussed a call, some work that the Bakers, BFAWU have been doing, and more recently they did a call that I watched, which they did really, really well on, and they were trying to reach out to a new workplace, to Wetherspoons workers, where they have very little, no recognition and membership in strong in certain places around the country, but not broadly across the company yet. And they ran a online petition first, which was a great way of spreading the word amongst Spoons workers, because it was at the time that Tim Martin announced he wasn't going to be paying people on furlough until the money came in, and sharing that on social between people who knew other workers in the situation got a lot of them into the first stage of it, taking action through a very low bar action of a petition. The next stage was to get them from there. You could segment them into a WhatsApp group, and hundreds of workers came into WhatsApp group for them to have the contact group for the first time. And they very quickly, as Emma said, didn't give a very long lead time on it. They said at the end of the week, we're going to have a big conference call, and built up to that over a period of days rather than weeks, and used that conference call to highlight particular stories from workers where they were getting involved, to give the social proof to get people over the line, and then kept putting the sign up to become a campaign leader form into the chat and referring to it. And they got a really high proportion of people who were interested in taking that campaign forward, from originally what was a group of people that they didn't have a great deal of contact with. So that kind of engagement ladder of low bar ask that spread really, really widely, personal relationship and community with each other, into a call where they're given the social and the organising call was really a nicely staged through funnel there. Michael, do you have anything that you wanted to kind of add on that idea of the ladder of engagement, what you do with people afterwards who have engaged with lots of your calls?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different different things that you can do. I think that and so many different ways you can play it. You can use the data to I think the first point I would say is the most important thing is collecting the data, because then once you've got the data, you can make tactical decisions on what suits your union organisation or what to do with it. This is one of the advantages over like an in-person event. You know exactly who's been on the call, and you have their email address and mobile number. Even when people sign into events, you've got the manual work of having to like transcribe all the data. Here you've got it all in a database. So then you work out what to do. At the NEU, we've pushed for rep recruitment. We've pushed for social media share. We've pushed for taking further action, and all of that kind of stuff. My colleague Henry Fowler, who the NEU's Zoom program wouldn't have been possible without, who is on leave today and not on this call, would sort of be able to explain in more detail about a lot of the organising work that we've done around this. That's more his area, but he's not here. He's not available today. But yeah, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that, Mike. We've got time for one or two more shorter questions, but I've got one here around the idea of using some of the additional functionality of Zoom calls in particular. So whilst most of the attention is on the presenters speaking, what's the kind of role of that side channels of chat, questions, polls, putting your hand up, or all that kind of thing, or of breakout rooms? What's the kind of value of stepping away from the main call? Who would like to answer that one?
I'm happy to. Do you want to say anything, Emma, or?
Yeah, I'll follow you. I'll come in after you.
Okay. So one of the issues about Zoom breakout rooms is they're not available on webinars. They're only available on the meeting function of Zoom. The meeting function of Zoom has a capacity of 1,000. So if you're doing a very large call, then it's not possible to facilitate that. However, for a smaller, more engaging call, webinars are good for mass broadcasting. But if you want people to like be more interactive in the call, then the breakout features are good, and we have utilized and used those features for a lot of our training calls. We have a training department in our organizing team that does a lot of this kind of stuff, and they use the breakout features. We've recently held our annual conference on Zoom, and we will be we are looking into ways of digital democracy, including using Zoom for polling. So Zoom has polling features that allows you to do up to 25 sets of polls per webinar, and it's in real time, so you can use it for digital democracy. There is of course a question of verified voting, so you need to make sure the people on the call are actually allowed to vote, but Zoom does give you a record of who has voted, so you can so you can go back and check that they were actually allowed to vote. So you can use Zoom polling for that. There are also an infinite amount of add-ons that you can buy for Zoom. So I've mentioned it in my presentation, we bought the software Verbit that allows for subtitles and transcript software, but there's loads of, like, you want something, you can get it. So and then add it on. So they're sort of like the main. You can also share your screen, as myself and Emma did on this call. The chat feature is really engaging, and as a lot of people did, they said hello in this call and where they're from and like all of that kind of stuff, and like get to talk to each other. In all the calls we've done, we've only had one problem where someone was extremely racist and they had to be removed and ejected from the call, which we did very simply and easily. So, but in general, we've done dozens of Zoom calls and we haven't had a problem. So chat's quite engaging, and yeah, I think that's it. I hope that answers the question. If it doesn't, let me know.
Emma, is there anything you want to add to that?
Just very quickly, that again, it comes down to the purpose of the call. I found that for these kind of organising calls or kind of online barnstorms where you're you're kind of launching a campaign or initiative and you want lots of people to sign up, that in that sort of situation, and actually a lot of these that I've done have been less than 1,000 people, and we've used the call, the meeting setup, so rather than the webinar, which this is. So in that you would have, you can still have speaker view, but you can also have gallery view, where everybody who's joined the call that has their video on, obviously people have got the option to have the videos off, but they're all in little boxes. And there's something, again, really kind of inspiring and uplifting about being able to scroll through. If you're someone who's joining and you're clicking through and there are pages and pages of other people sitting in their living rooms and, out in the garden or whatever, who are also there on the call, there's something really uplifting about that as well. And yeah, the breakout feature can work really well, but on a large call, I'd only use any of these other features if it was going to support what you were trying to achieve in the call. And if in an organising call, you're trying to sort of funnel everything through to that organising ask and to really maximise your conversion of people attending the call to people who've then signed up to volunteer, I wouldn't do anything that sort of distracted from that, personally.
Brilliant, thanks. And I totally echo Emma's point there around social proof. If we tell a supporter, a member, to do something, it's marketing. If another participant tells them to do it, it's social proof, and it's much more powerful. So the showing each other to each other, the proof that you're all there and you're all together, be it through showing all the photos or the chat, is really powerful. My only tip on that would be, don't try and do it all yourself. And thanks to my colleague Leanne, who's looking over the chat and has been kind of posting stuff there, because you will lose yourself in between the two. You've got to really keep focused on what you're doing. I think we're about time of all we've got time for at the moment. So I just wanted to wrap up. I wanted to say a big thanks to everyone for coming along, and really good luck in your future activity in conference calling. Let us know at the Digital Lab what you're getting up to. We're really interested to see where this goes for unions. It could be really powerful. And a big thanks to Mike and to Emma for sharing their experience and insight in this. I really gained a lot from listening to you guys. So thank you very much. And wishing everybody else a good afternoon. We're going to be publishing some of the stuff afterwards, and I've seen a couple of comments about how we follow stuff up. And yeah, this is something that I think unions will need to be producing a lot more and discussing a lot more as unions' use of this technology grows. Yeah, watch this space.